Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. While looking outside, I'm reminded of two things. One is the beauty of God's creation, and then I also look at this lake and knowing how low it is and the drought that we're facing. So that's the kind of dualism that we're facing right now. Yes?
The screen?
It doesn't. Yeah. Well, you want to bring it up so people can see the outdoors? Yeah. And first of all, we're going to, I know there's some folks here that their project is primarily an advocacy campaign. Who would that be? Would you raise your hand? There's a handful of you. And so what we're going to do is those folks are going to join Susan in the other room. We're not going to break out the whole time, in separation, but to, just this morning, because there's a little bit different in what you're doing and a little bit different process and some different needs. And so, Susan, where's Susan? Yeah, if you can, if the advocacy folks can have a conversation out, and we want to meet everybody's needs well and recognize the different processes and approaches that people are working with.
Some of you, I'm sure some of you have met Sojiko Pagulayan from Cambodia via the Philippines. His wife and son are here. You've seen them hanging around. And Patty and Adam, they need to get to the airport, Patty and Adam do, Saturday morning. Like they need to leave here about 6 a.m. Saturday morning to go to the airport. And there's several of you with cars. If there's a volunteer to take them to the airport, we'd love for that to happen. If not, we can get a taxi. But there's several of us. Thank you. You don't have to be dressed. You can take them naked.
And you have permission. Naked.
Gonna go naked. Gonna go naked, Pat. Not naked. Just taking out everything on the professor turned it over.
Okay, this morning we're going to do the final piece on exploring your community. And again, if you look, rotate, and listen. And we're going to focus mainly this morning on listening, but just some review and extension. If you turn to your workbooks on page 4. And again, some communities are different than others. Some of you are really geographical landscapes, and others might be, for instance, a college campus or something like that. And so the process is, again, you need to adapt them a little bit in that case. But particularly if you're in a geographical landscape, in page 4, I would suggest first just going out to kind of feel and look and listen a little bit. So it says first simply just go out, look, and listen by walking your community. Just kind of walk at a nice strolling pace. If somebody speaks to you, if you see someone to visit with, you might strike up a conversation. If they ask, just say you're doing a neighborhood survey for a church or a congregation, your congregation. You can look in your storefronts, restaurants, go in shops, markets, and other spaces open to the public. And be particularly attentive to what we call the natural or the creative world, but also the human world. See the people, the buildings, the uses of space, the birds, the animals, the streams, the trees, the vistas, emptiness, traffic, interactions, light and dark. Go out and just listen. Hear the noises, the wind or the rain, the constant sounds, the sirens, conversations. Smell or taste food, foliage, exhaust. Feel the sun, the wind, the rain, indoor environs, surfaces. And so just the first time, just go out and be attentive. Don't be analyzing so much. Just kind of open your mind, be aware. And once you've done that and you feel like you're to the point of moving into a more, analysis space on page 5, these are just some guide questions. Again, all of this is intended as a guide. You're going to adapt it in your own way. But again, look, what are the strengths of your landscape? What is stressed in your landscape? What is sacred in your landscape? Who lives in your landscape? Who is marginalized? How are these folks treated? What is the interplay between the natural and the social? What is the interplay between the natural and the economic? How does your domain, say food, protecting biodiversity, water, function and flourish in your community? So these are some guide questions in terms of looking and exploring your community, and just work your way through the guide questions. And if you have other questions that you want to explore, of course, explore those. And this takes us through the point of looking. And then next on page 6, locate. And again, it's using our eyes that we developed yesterday in terms of locating, in terms of assets in your community. Associations, where do people come together? Where do they gather strength together? Where do they solve problems together? Where do they socialize and have fun together? Where do they fellowship together? So what are the associations of your community? So you can draw on these strengths from your community. Where do people gather? Where you can go talk to people. And so locate those. Where are the amenities? Where are the parks? Where do people recreate? Where do people become refreshed through God's creation? Name some of those. Where are the academies? Some of these are formal, like Tennessee State University, but others are very informal. Where do people learn together? Where do people teach each other? Where do people gather wisdom from each other? So use academy in the broad sense of the term, the more informal sense of the term. Where do folks in your landscape learn from each other? And so locate the associations, locate the amenities, locate the academies in your community. Locate the shops, particularly the shops that are locally owned. Locate the workshops where people are crafting things in your community. So locate the shops and the workshops. And then locate the natural services. Natural services is the term that we use in terms of how does the natural world cleanse itself, and how does it provide a space for us in terms of, how does it, we put things into the environment, how does it cleanse those out? How does it refresh itself? And again, the term resources is one I'm somewhat uncomfortable with, but on the other hand, we do utilize things. And so where do we find things from the natural world that we utilize? And then finally, where is the natural beauty? And of course, it's all around us. Are there particular places where we particularly focus on that? That's of course going to be different for different folks. Yes?
Obviously, you're talking about a metropolitan area.
Mm-hmm.
So in a rural area, in unincorporated, sorry, I have to be the devil's advocate here. Rural community, less than 50, unincorporated, no businesses.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest there?
Well, again, if you have no shops, I assume there are places where people come together?
No.
Some places, no places whatsoever?
They go to other communities for their shopping.
Okay, I'm not talking about shopping, but are there places where people
No.
come together at all?
There's nothing. There's no coffee shop, no gas station,
Are there
nothing. A
congregations?
church and about maybe 30 houses.
Okay, there's a church that they come
Oh, yeah.
together? Okay. Yes, again, if you're, what would you suggest in that term?
Well,
Seriously,
what I was thinking about doing was just going door to door
okay?
on a Saturday morning.
Okay,
But,
yeah, that makes sense.
That's why the rural folks need to get together.
yeah,
Call
yeah.
for some
Yeah.
of this.
And if you're that,
Just move.
yeah.
Really well.
If you're in a small town, you probably have these things. If you're in a completely unincorporated area, of course, people do in those areas. You're part of a larger. You also probably need to think of yourself too, in a little bit in terms of you're part of a larger area that people do interact throughout the county probably. And so they're shopping in an area outside of their town, but they're probably going to a lot of the same places. And so at least identifying, you're probably your larger region a little bit, because those become assets to you too. Because if you're in a rural area, you're shopping, there's a larger town where people are going to shop. There's probably, they do go and gather and sometimes perhaps in restaurants in that town. Yes.
So, my mother lives in itty bitty nowhere, Alabama. They do have a dog and all, that's about it. But their congressman came in and did organizing. And so you may want to ask your congressperson to come and help to the organizing meeting.
Yeah. And so, yeah, my sense is though, yeah, in the rural areas, you're part of, it's a little bit of a larger landscape too, in terms of where people go for their economic interactions and things like that. And so, identifying those and knowing where those are, they may be assets to you, they may not. It may be that you're just simply going door to door and gathering people in somebody's house or something like that. And once you have a bunch of gathering people together for a meeting. And so it's gonna vary from place to place, but that would be my sense of it. So is that helpful?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. So,
Done.
yeah.
I'm not quite sure if I understood what is natural services.
Again, it's just how does the natural world provide a living space for us? How does it replenish itself? How does it replenish what we put into it and clean it out, if possible? If it's not doing that well, if you put our watersheds, our wetlands, for instance, would be a natural service for you. If you're, do other people have examples of? Yes.
In my area, the dismal swamp
Okay.
holds water, builds peat, but it filters a lot of rain, and it also holds water, the ground is not saturated, and keeps the landscape from flood.
Right. That would be a perfect example of natural service.
Just how many trees are in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I mean, just some neighborhoods are lots of trees and they cool and keep moisture in the air. I mean, it's just trees are a natural service.
Yes.
I mean, snowcats and stays, holds the water.
Right. Other examples of natural services.
Just thinking of stormwater drains is an issue, especially in urban areas, because it brings so much stuff with it.
Yeah, sometimes the natural services get overwhelmed. There are ways that the natural world will fund itself, but if we pour too much into it, then it becomes overwhelmed. And that's a lot of what we're dealing with. Our natural services, our trees draw down carbon from the atmosphere, but when we pour too much carbon in the atmosphere, our trees are a natural service drawing down the carbon. But when we pour too much in it, it tends to overwhelm that. So that's really what we're facing, of course, with all of this. Any other thoughts on natural services? Yeah.
It's like the Tonle River.
What's that?
Tonle Lake, the biggest lake in Japan, provides food, fish for the whole population. Like 3 million can feed 3 million.
Exactly.
So, like you talked earlier, the vegetation helps with erosion control, what is available and not available, and stuff like that.
Natural pollinators.
Without pollinators, they. Any other thoughts on that? So just again, it's just exploring your community. You're not engaged in a test. You're engaged in something that you're trying to identify the things, and you're trying to open yourself up to all the possibilities out there. The possibilities that might, of course, aid your project and provide energy for your project, provide space for your project, provide ideas for your project. You're out there identifying, and sometimes it might be fairly late into your project, but it's supporting the larger community and the life of the larger community. And that's important to recognize too. And so it's just a matter of spending some time feeling your community, starting to kind of address some of these questions, and spending some time locating what's out there. Because as we just found out very briefly yesterday in looking at these pictures, that there's surprising places that can be tapped into. And so if we just go to the obvious, we might miss some real gifts that are out there for our possibilities. And some things that will happen that are very unexpected, unanticipated. And so it's just a matter of being open to all of that. And so, any final questions about looking and comments on looking and locating? Okay, the next piece is listening. And I'm sorry, I'm learning lots of names. Your name again? You brought up, yes, you?
Oh, Cheryl.
Cheryl, yes. You talked about going door to door. This is the part of listening, going out and talking to your community. This is extraordinarily important. Before you start our projects, we want to listen to our community. And a lot of it, you can do this in small groups, but often it happens best just on a kind of conversation with an individual. We often call these one-on-ones in community organizing jargon, but essentially just a kind of a guided conversation with people. You're not just flowing and complaining about Donald Trump or whatever, or the fact that the Cubs won the World Series, but you tend to be focused on your particular domain. And so, again, it can happen from anywhere from 20 minutes to 40 minutes to an hour probably. And if it's going on too long, then you might want to, it's becoming very fruitful, but you're also feeling that the time to break it, you can reschedule a second conversation. And these are just, on page 7, I have some kind of guide questions. But again, you want to adapt these to your own style, adapt these to your own context. That used to be an old cultural situation. But some guide questions: how did you come to this community? Where did you grow up? How did this impact you? And for instance, if your domain is food, how did you come to care about, this is kind of how food is produced and distributed. You'd probably say that a little bit differently in our community, but you get the gist of that. How do you see how food is produced being done well? So you draw out the things that are being done well in your community. You want to highlight those. But also, how is it done poorly, and how does this impact people? And how do people see this impact in the ecology or your local ecosystem? What are your hopes regarding how food is produced and distributed in the community? How might you see yourself contributing to improvements? Who are you connected to that might help us in our efforts? So you're drawing on people's connections. And how might they contribute? And just allow them to ask any questions that they might have. And then if you have the sense from them that they are interested, it may be just that the conversation was useful, but that you don't get a real sense of energy there around what you're doing. But if there is a sense of openness and willingness, you might ask, would you be willing to come to a meeting to explore these possibilities further? And just kind of nail that down during the conversation.
Would you say, speak a little more about who you're interviewing? Are these people you have already identified as having an interest in your project, or these random conversations?
You're probably going to want to go out, again, it depends on your community. It probably is best to start with folks that you kind of identify, but also branch it out a little bit beyond that, just to folks beyond that. So start with the folks that you've kind of identified, and start with some folks you're comfortable with, particularly if you haven't done this before, and then kind of stretch your comfort level out beyond folks that would be the usual suspects, as it were, and try to get a variety of perspectives on this from your community, and try to talk to some folks that you haven't talked to before, and just get try to get some communities are very complex in terms of their various groups that are in the community, and so then you would try to have that reflected in who you talk to. There's complexity, of course, in every community, but some of the obvious forms of complexity might not be there in some communities, so, in terms of great deals of diversity. But try to draw out beyond, try to draw out a little bit beyond, draw out beyond who to just automatically associate, and really try to tap into some of that. And so, again, there's no magic number about how many people you talk to. Get a sense. Again, this is not an exercise. Again, of course, all of this is just to help further your project and get a sense of community. Yes.
Sometimes it's nice when you're talking to someone, ask them who you should talk to.
That's another good question.
Because there may be people that you're unaware of that would really inform either how you identify the space, the landscape of your project, how you narrow it down, or how you expand it.
Yes, and so you're trying to get, that's a great point, And so that's another good question that you could add here in terms of who you connected that might help in your efforts, who you might talk to, who else you might talk to. Just get out there and talk to, try to talk to at least a dozen folks, but expand that beyond if it makes sense in the community, I would think.
Is an alternative, or let me rephrase this, what do you think about the alternative? If you're in already in a church or a group that you think has some people that are interested, would you always take the one-on-one approach first, or might you all, an alternative might be to have gathering of people that are interested in a particular project and then you know, I don't know, do you think this is still a better approach?
I think it's always important to have some one-on-ones before you gather folks, just to get a sense of things. But one kind of twist on that might be to bring some folks together that are interested in doing a project and kind of guide them through this listening process and have them go out. If you have a group that's interested in going, then have them go out and do some one-on-ones too. I always find that you learn a little bit more when you're sitting down and talking with somebody one-on-one than you are kind of usually in a group. And so you can get some real depth in that one-on-one. But one way of doing it is if you're to the point where you have a group that's working on a project, then get that group to go out and do some of that listening too. That's a good way of doing it. Yeah?
Having been on the receiving end of a one-on-one, I think it's important to somehow or another get back to the person, even if you don't end up having a meeting. I just recall having an hour-long conversation with a person doing a one-on-one and never heard from them again. I don't know if I was boring or what, but I was obviously sympathetic to what they were trying to do, but never heard a peep back from them. So follow through is important.
And yeah, I think that's important, Paul. That's a good point. And another point is that they're going to feel uncomfortable if you're writing down everything that they say. It's okay to take a few notes, because that kind of indicates that you're listening and noting the important things. And then maybe after the interview too, you can sit down and write down things a little bit more extensively. But if they're feeling like you're writing down everything they say, that they feel like they're being interviewed by a reporter as opposed to a conversation. But don't feel afraid to take down a few notes, here and there.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, hey, I'm a reporter for a living, so what are you telling us that's different than what I do every day? And maybe I have a little more skill at what I'm doing, and so people don't maybe people freak out when I interview them, but usually they don't. Usually people like me.
There's probably there's not a whole lot of difference other than the fact that it's perhaps a little bit more conversational.
Which is what I try to get with people too. The last thing you want is people dumping facts on you.
Yeah.
You want them telling you stories.
Right. Yeah. Paul, and then.
Well, maybe it's implicit, but I think there's a lot of relationship building that's going on here. It's as much that as it is garnering particular information.
Right.
And that's where just learning a little bit more about
where
they came from, how they ended up here, a little bit about themselves.
Yeah, you're also trying to get I think that's exactly right, Paul. And you're also trying to get a sense of really what motivates them, what their passion is, what their concerns are, but also what motivates them, what their passion is. So if you can draw on that passion, yes.
Well, I need this one-on-one. Did you in your projects, did you call people up and say, hey, I want to meet with you, or was it on the street, or how do you start this?
You probably started with people that you know and are comfortable with.
You just said, let's meet and talk?
Yeah, let's meet and talk. It's as simple as that. Can we have coffee together? Can we? Yeah. I mean, you get a sense of I'm doing, exploring a project, but can we meet and talk? Give a little bit of that context, but you don't need to go beyond that. And then I think it was Paul suggested that, suggested that, then you can start asking, well, who would they suggest that you talk to? And you can say, well, so-and-so, yeah. And so sometimes this is done by, you know, if you feel comfortable knocking on doors in your neighborhood, that's one way of doing it. And maybe setting up a time that you can come back and talk. Or there's people in your congregation you can talk. You know, there's any numbers of ways that you can find folks. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking that not only talk one by one, but in this talking, you can find the people that person that have enough passion and have this leadership spirit that will be sharing easily, naturally, these topics. So, I'm thinking as well, the Holy Spirit can take us to look at that person, especially. Meanwhile, we are talking with many people to lead us to that person.
Exactly. Yeah, you're trying to identify the folks that can provide some leadership for your project too. And yeah, and you see that and you hear that, like you said.
I think it's important our discussions based on my experience. And I think it has something to do with this question calling about. I'm imagining a community where I have no friends. I have a burden to organize this community. That's good. And I also recognize that there are uniqueness and the reason unites our community. Especially in our place, I think it's important to consider the ritual proposal. It's really important for us. Why? Because sometimes it will be easily done as, big or something like that. Especially in our place, that really legalization is happening in the countryside. So it will be safe for our security, for our, meaningful discussions and talks. We could do a lot of portfolio. Because there are local leaders, indigenous people that we have keep things like that. So I don't know if it's included in how we explore or how we explore the community. For us, actually, that's I think significant in our community.
I have something to bring up. I don't know if it's unrelated or not, so I'm sorry if it's unrelated. But yesterday at the airport, so like 7 years ago, I gave up styrofoam. I will go without a cup of coffee or without food if you're going to serve it to me on styrofoam. So I, of course, got up at 4 in the morning, and by the time I got to Minneapolis, I'm from Duluth, I wanted a cup of coffee. And I went to this coffee shop called the Itasca Coffee Shop, which if you're from Minnesota, you know Itasca is a state park, blah, blah, blah. And so I asked these girls working there, hey, can I get a coffee to go? And they're like, oh yeah. I said, and then I said, are you gonna put it in this styrofoam cup? And they said, well, yeah. And to me, now I'm sorry if this is maybe politically incorrect or whatever, but they looked to me like they were Somalians. Because we have a whole bunch of Somalians working in our Minneapolis airport. And she said, what is styrofoam? And I thought, really? You really don't know? And then beside her, another person had a Starbucks cup that was made out of paper. And I said, that Starbucks cup there is made out of paper. Now that will degrade and go back into the earth. And there was a second girl there with her. I said, but this styrofoam cup, this will not degrade and go back to the earth. So if you're going to sell me a cup of coffee in a styrofoam cup, I'm sorry, I'm not buying it from you. And I left. And they both said, thank you. You have just taught us something we didn't know.
Thanks for sharing that. We're going to now, again, the first couple times you do this, it's like anything else that you gain comfort in it. And so you probably want to start with people that are you feel comfortable with, and you can you learn with, and yes.
So we were just having a little side conversation. So
you know, I'm busy, everybody's busy,
Mhm.
and can you just talk about the efficiency of having all these conversations and versus, you know, the temptation is so intense to just do it by email, you know?
Yeah.
Just so you can hit a lot of people.
No,
and everything like that.
it's
So can
really-
you just talk about
Yeah,
that?
community development is largely, we're in this terrifyingly busy culture. And even activism tends to make us more and more and more and more busy. And so a lot of it is the relationship building. A lot of it is just the taking the time to converse, taking the time to, we're not so much gathering information here. Is we can do information gathering perhaps through a survey. You're trying to develop a relationship with somebody. You're trying to deepen that relationship with somebody around your passion. And so it's less efficient, but I think it's more effective.
Okay, that's helpful.
Because I donate to different causes, I get on my personal email at least 50 emails a day from different, and they're all good causes. And on my professional one, I get over 100. I don't even read them. I can't read all of them. So I actually have a separate account that only got people that I personally want to contact. And if I tell someone else, if you're going to contact me through there, call me, I won't even see it. So that's the problem with these huge group emails. If you're like me and you get, you know, between the two accounts, 150 a day, I'm not even going to see most of them. You know, so, you know, if you give me a phone call and say, hey, I sent you something, I'll put your name in and I'll find it and I'll read it. But most of it,
Yeah, the personal touch, actually, interestingly enough, the personal touch tends to become more effective in a culture that becomes so busy because, I see it, and I'll get to you. It becomes more effective. I mean, just, you know, I have to do some fundraising for some of my stuff. I do a nice little handwritten thank you note. And just that personal touch. Nowadays, when we never get anything like that in the mail, you know, it kind of, it has a little bit more impact perhaps than it did before. And so, if you want to do just kind of a wide splash of things, email and such can be effective, but it's the personal. People come to things because somebody they know personally invited them. We get so inundated with stuff nowadays that just, you know, we have our coffee hour at Vanderbilt, and there's 500 things announced at coffee hour every week. And it's like, well, you've got the information out there, but you know, but it's probably because I come to you and say, you know, I've got this thing happening, you know, it'd be really important for me if you could come, if at all possible. And that's where people come. And so until you've sat down and had that conversation with them, you know, then you've at least established enough of a relationship that you can.
I was listening to a podcast before I got here, and it was talking about work is meditation. We don't think about work, and that work is actually can be very fulfilling. And if we approach our community conversations, that fly.
It's over here.
Must be my condition. But anyway, if we approach these community conversations with grace, saying, okay, I'm going to just do 1 week. That's all I can do. I'm just going to say this 1 hour a week. And think of that as a meditative time with the person you're sharing with. It might sort of alleviate that overwhelming thing like, oh my gosh, I've got to talk to 20 people.
Right.
It takes 20 weeks. It takes 20 weeks.
It takes 20 weeks. Again, work at these projects at your speed. And just, that's a really good point. Just work at your speed. And again, you don't feel like you have to do 100 of these if you know, 8 to 12 is sufficient. 8 to 12 is sufficient, but do make an effort to do these. That's my advice. Any other final comments before we do a little bit of practice?
I would just say what you're doing is you're making connection and raising awareness and planting seed. And you don't know what's the result going to be. So that's why the personal, I think, you emphasize that is so important, because that connection is, you're raising awareness, much like the styrofoam cup. I mean, I think that's a good example. This project, you're raising awareness. And they may come later. They may not be interested right now, but they may come later.
And those girls might tell their boss, hey, we just had a lady in here and she wouldn't buy coffee from us.
So, back to the email conversation, I organized a Creation Care Ministry team in the Virginia conference. And I sent out just a blanket email on the ClergyNet and the laity serves, just to satisfy myself if there was anybody else out there that cared. And it was a great way to assess, is there even any interest in that community? And there was, and so then we did the meeting stuff.
One of the things I was thinking is, it's difficult when someone invites you join his or her project, because you don't feel that you have to do that. Sometimes when someone invited me in my place to join her or his project, I think, really, I'm not interested. Maybe you need some support, so I will be 2 months with you. But because I have a relationship or a sympathetic relationship or whatever. But in this kind of project, when I was thinking how to figure out, one of the things important to me was listening. And I think if we are just listening like that, as psychologists, but no interaction, wouldn't work. I guess this listening is talking as well. So when we talk, we can build together the project. So we can the project come out from the different talks. So it will be our project and not my project.
Right. Right. You're exactly right. Part of these conversations is it will very much shape your project and becomes a with rather than a to. Very great point. We're going to practice this a little bit, and again, it's always a little artificial to practice things, and I know that, but it also it will help us kind of just get a little bit rough practice in our skills. And so, who in here considers themselves as food as their primary domain? Raise your hand. Anybody?
Food waste.
What's that?
The waste of it.
Okay. Who considers themselves in kind of the recycling field? Okay. Who considers themselves in the energy field? Okay. Who considers themselves in water? Okay. We have 2 in water, so why don't you be in water for this one? Other domains or fields that I've missed? Education.
More focused on church.
What's that?
Church organization stuff.
Yeah.
Isn't it all the same?
Trees.
Animals.
Trees and biodiversity. Yeah, let's look at that. In terms of education, it's going to be a little hard to interview in terms of education. So let's.
I can fit in with just fine.
Yeah, think of a field that you want to be in. And the same with the church, just for this practice area. And so let's again raise your hand with food. Okay, pair off with somebody in that food domain. Water. Who are the 2 water folks are together?
Who is the other?
Yeah. Energy folks, pair off with somebody in your energy field. Let's see, biodiversity. Okay. Find the other 2 biodiversity people. Recycling and waste. Find one in that. And once you get settled, I'll give you your directions.
I didn't see
Any additional instructions? I think it was Naomi.
What are you?
Yes. Sit down with your pair. Sit down with your pair and I'll give you instructions. Well, we're staying here until you get your
This really would work.
Yes, listen up, everybody, once you're paired up. Listen up once you're paired up. Listen up once you're paired up. Okay, basically, we've got about a half an hour, so it's about a 15-minute per. So you're basically going to have this conversation about their community and their domain and their community. Okay, so you're asking, for instance, if it's food, you're going to be asking them about food in their community, but that's also your interest. If it's energy, you're asking around energy in your community. So just kind of use these suggested interview questions as a guide, but also put it, make it natural to you. Kind of work this so it's a natural conversation to you. You've got about 15 minutes for each conversation. Normally a conversation would go longer, so that's it. So just find a place where you're comfortable with and come back at 5 minutes before 10, please. What do you need to find in person? What I would do.
I'm targeting president of the So he's looking for, I want to talk to him.
Oh, well, that's kind of working.
Taking classes.
Yeah, well, why don't you and Naomi go together?
Say, Kelly,
Okay, sure, I'll be glad to work.
Okay.
people,